Hey everyone, it's Clint. Welcome to Sweetcast. This is nutty. This is the same kind of conundrum that comes up over and over and over again. I've pointed this out many times. Let me just read this headline for you so you can, let this sink in. Marvel's X-Men are finally getting serious about diversity because they weren't serious about diversity before. Now, it doesn't matter how many times someone like Rich Johnston will say that comics have always been political, they've always been radical, they've always been diverse, they've always been everything that a lot of people are hating about comics today. Now, when I hear either Rich Johnston or anybody say something like that, I say, but then why are you trying to progress or push things forward? Why are you trying to change things, right? And here you go. This is the other shoe. You can't have it both ways. Both things can't be true at the same time. It's kind of silly. It kind of reminds me about how people will say, like they'll take all the credit for, socialist countries have all these virtues about, socialist countries. Oh, but that's not real socialism, right? Like there's something else. Like it's only partially socialist. So it's like you just kind of change narratives depending on what your goal is. Do you want to take credit for what's existing, or do you want to basically dump on everything that's existing and try to push towards some other beautiful utopia? All right, so this is basically ratcheting it up to the next level. We're gonna get through this. Bear with me. This was January 13th, 2020, so that's today, but you're going to see this on the 14th. X-Men, or the X-Men franchise, is supposed to be about diversity, and Leah Williams and David Balladron, X-Factor, looks like it's set to finally embrace that. So yeah, it's finally embracing diversity. It wasn't before. Oh boy. All right, here we go. Marvel's X-Men comics are finally getting serious about diversity. The X-Men have traditionally been viewed as a metaphor for diversity. Now, I don't know if everybody has viewed the X-Men as a metaphor for diversity. I'll tell you, I think for me anyway, and I think for a lot of people, the metaphor was being an outcast or being different. Not necessarily diversity in the current sense of intersectionalism. But I'll just give you the benefit of the doubt. Let's say that the X-Men was entirely intended to mean diversity, and the whole that's what it's always been about since its conception and thereafter. If that's the case, why does it have to change? Why was it not necessarily doing it for you? What more does it have to do? All right, the article continues. The campaign for mutant rights has been designed as a parallel to the battle for racial equality in the 90s. In particular, it was extended to serve as a metaphor for the LGBTQ plus movement. You know what's kind of nice about metaphors in storytelling is you don't have to be so on the nose. You can just make the body of work, which I think the X-Men has done in history, and then just leave it up to interpretation. Allow the audience, allow the readers to connect with it however they would like. If people are going to interpret it differently, that's kind of the beauty of comics. That's kind of the beauty of storytelling. Why be so on the nose that you have to interpret it one certain way? Or is it that a variety of people were interpreting it a variety of different ways, and so now it has to be official? Like, no, it was about diversity and the LGBTQ plus movement. That's what this has always been about. All right, article continues. In spite of that, the X-Men comics have been strangely slow to embrace true diversity. So before it was fake diversity, it wasn't real. Now it's true diversity. So whatever it was symbolic of before, buckle up, because now it's going to get even better. All right, there are only a handful of LGBTQ plus characters, and their relationships have seldom been in the spotlight. Okay, here's the thing. Now you can make a comic that is literally about LGBTQ plus characters. You could do that, but then then there's no metaphor. Like, what is the mutant race for? Is that not enough? Is that not enough of a I don't know, being a marginalized community, except for the fact that you do have superpowers, so gotta have that going for you. But is that enough to make you an outcast, or do you really have to be that on the nose about this? I gotta imagine that there are some number of LGBTQ plus comic readers that kind of get annoyed by this. I don't know, let me know. To me, that's kind of patronizing, that it has to be so on the nose, that the work just can't stand for itself, like what it has always been. whether that was untrue, like fake diversity, you know, like let's face it, it's been mutants, but you can relate to it. But just so that there's no confusion as to what the metaphor is really about, they're going to go ahead and just directly go for it. All right, most high profile is North Star. Okay, so they've had gay characters, but those were fake. Those were not real. Now we're going to get to the true diversity. All right, all this looks set to change according to Polygon. Leah Williams and David Baldion. Baldion? Sure, we'll go with that. Have been placed in charge of a new X Factor book. This team will investigate mutant missing persons cases across the world, and Williams has put together a team that is the most diverse ever seen in X-Men comics. The X Factor group is headed by North Star himself, and Williams intended to explore just how the relationship between a mutant and a baseline human works in the age of Krakoa. All right, Wolverine's son, Daken, is also on board. He's one of the few bisexual characters. I had no idea. Learn something new every day. Another team member is Rachel Gray, who is a legendary X-Men scribe Chris Claremont intended to portray as a lesbian, and who had occasional lesbian subtext in her stories. Now that subtext was not true though, because trust me, the true stuff is coming. At least according to this article. All right, this one's kind of, I don't know. Get ready. It's a little cringy. The X-Men books have always hinted at representation and diversity, but they've seldom actually done it. They've failed before. So again, like, what is it? Have they always been that way? Have they always been radically diverse? Or is this new? Have they not been radical? Which is it? All right, this has been true of the Hickman era as ever. I can't believe they actually put this. Hickman hinted at the polyamorous relationship between Cyclops, Jean Grey, and Wolverine. Now, I don't know that he really said something it had to do with one of the diagrams in the book. Like, it showed the layout of their rooms, and there was like connecting doors between Cyclops, Jean Grey, and Wolverine. That was it. I mean, I don't know how intentional all that was. A lot of people were reading into it. But this, if nothing else, I mean, you could just chalk it up to fan theory. All right, but they kept it low-key enough to be in the eye of the beholder. But Leah Williams has taken to Twitter to suggest that shouldn't be the case in her new X Factor run. All right, here we go. So Leah Williams says, don't let us off the hook yet. Me tweeting about it doesn't count until it shows up in the book. Because, I don't know, for some reason, I don't know, you committed to it and then you're just not going to do it. I don't know. All I know is when a story's like main intention is to just show diversity, I got to tell you, this is a new thing. Because normally it's like the story. The story is the main thing. Couldn't you just do the story and then make it your utopian diversity and not announce it ahead of time? Like, what's the point of that? But you can't let the work speak for itself. Right? This is in the age of virtue signaling on Twitter. So you got to get your virtue points. And that's, the reason why you'd have to hold Leah Williams to it is because the virtue points are more important than actually the follow through. Because most people that want to see it aren't actually reading it. They just want to see it. I had the same thing with, people I know in real life who were pretty into, Marvel movies being more diverse. Even though they didn't want to watch Marvel movies, they were really into the idea of comics being more diverse. We had this discussion too, but they didn't read any comics whatsoever and had no plans to, even if those changes were made. It was more just like the heartwarming feeling that somewhere out there my opinions are being followed through with. All right, so yeah, kind of funny. All right, the relationships are intended to be central to X Factor. Williams is particularly invested in the relationship between North Star and her ex-husband. Yada yada yada. Okay, so I'll be honest. I'm not going to read it anyway. I, wasn't even close to reading it. I actually do think that, there's room for all kinds of stories. That's fine. Freedom of speech. I've been thinking about this a lot more lately. I really want to be very firm with, I think anybody should be able to tell whatever story they want to tell. The only thing here, though, is you can't expect those stories to sell well, especially when you're putting the identity politics first and foremost, so much so that you want to announce it ahead of time as a selling point, as opposed to getting into the story for the selling point. But to say that X-Men comics have never embodied diversity, or that they've somehow failed in the past, I really think that's a mistake. You might want to rethink that. All right, thanks so much for listening to the video. If you enjoyed this content, please hit like and subscribe. I am gearing up for another crowdfunding campaign. This is Downcast number 2. We finished fulfillment of the first book. It was fun. I did a survey and heard back from many of the backers, definitely not all of them. We had a lot of backers. So I'm getting ready for this next part. It's time to get into production on the next book. I've taken a lot of your feedback to heart, and I just want to remind you that this is important. It's really important for me because you all that backed the campaign gave me a chance to break into comics. It wasn't Marvel, it wasn't DC, had nothing to do with literally anything else other than we've got to know each other a little bit better because of the videos that I make, and you gave me a shot to publish a book. So I published my first comic. I think most people really enjoyed it, and so we're bringing it back to finish off the story arc and give you another book. So really appreciate it. If you haven't signed up for the mailing list, it's worth your time. It's in the description below, and that'll get you access to secret perks and discounts. So thanks very much, and I will see you next time.